So, okay, today I wanted to talk about kind of utilizing different locations, having like multiple different bases. I'm a complete believer in this philosophy. I actually took this from Andrew Henderson, um, who is kind of like an international tax accountant who helps high level entrepreneurs reduce their taxes. So anyway, he has the idea of having multiple different bases around the world. So for example, you have one location for your business. You have one location for having fun. You maybe have one location for like relaxing, and then you could have like another location maybe for like your family and for your friends, and maybe like another place for like winter sports, or maybe that falls into your like fun category as well. But the general idea is to understand like your goals and find locations that align really, really well with them. I don't believe that there's actually one location that kind of covers, that is the most optimized location for all of your goals. For example, Georgia in Eastern Europe, I've lived out in for 4 years. For business, I think it's fantastic. A foreigner can open up a company there, a foreigner can have a bank account there, it's 0% taxes, you have access to very, very cheap labor. Um, However, in terms of fun, it's very, very limited. In terms of dating, it's also like if you're looking at pursuing multiple women, it's not the best country, but for finding a girlfriend, it's actually probably one of the best. Um, in terms of like going out to great restaurants and there being like a wide selection of like food and great restaurants to go to, it's very, very limited. Customer service is appalling. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to just sit there complaining about Georgia. I'm just kind of weighing up the fact that there's pros and cons of each country. So as much as I choose Georgia for my business, to host my business there because of the reasons I just mentioned, I also have an apartment there. I also have cars there. Like I have assets there. I love it as a country, but it definitely doesn't. There's no one country, in my opinion, in the world that serves all purposes. It's also very, very cheap to live in, by the way, I should add, which for some of you is something that you should really consider. Not necessarily Georgia, but just living in like a cheaper country. If you're in the US or in the UK or in like these major countries paying huge bills and you feel that you haven't got financial freedom, you can very easily achieve that if you're able to work online and go and live in like these cheaper countries, which is the whole idea of where like the digital nomad movement came from. Um, in terms of my thoughts on being a digital nomad, I have been a digital nomad for about 2 years when I first started out. If you're doing like a freelance job, if you're like a designer or a developer or any like a copywriter, whatever type of job you can do online, and you're working for someone else or you're working as a freelancer, that's fine, you can do it. However, if you're trying to build a business, I do not suggest you to be a digital nomad moving around all the time. Travel comes with its own set of problems, and you can try to minimize them as much as possible, but there's just unforeseen things, which is kind of like the beauty of travel, right? You're going there for the unknown experiences. However, when you're trying to run a business, you kind of want to minimize the number of unforeseeable events and kind of issues that happen. Like I remember when I was in Bali on a call with like trying to close a client for like $10,000, and there's a power cut and like a thunderstorm going on, and it always happens at the worst times as well, right? And like even like sometimes more recently, like I try to travel around from to a new location every 3 months. So at the moment, I'm in Europe. Prior to this, I spent 3 months in Colombia, and before this, I was in Dubai for 3 months. Prior to that, I was in Georgia for 3 months. Um, but even doing like not moving around all the time, just moving around every 3 months, we still encounter uh, our own like unique set of issues. So I try to minimize like moving of locations to like 4 different bases per year, but make sure that you understand each different location and really utilize it to its strengths. For example, Dubai is absolutely fantastic for networking. The people that you can meet out there are great. I love Dubai for like the fun aspect of things, like great restaurants, always something kind of going on. Same with Colombia, like for pursuing women. Colombia is a perfect example, actually. I'm British, and I think they're kind of used to a lot of Americans going on. Don't get me wrong, they still love Americans, but as soon as they would hear like my accent. Not that I think I even have a strong British accent, but as soon as like they realised that I was British and not American, like blonde hair, blue eyes, let's just say it really puts dating in your favor, and it's easy enough there as it is. So kind of depending on your goals, I really believe in trying to put yourself in a position where you're putting the odds in your favor of success. And those goals can be anything. Um, for example, another big one for me is like fitness. I find whenever I'm in Dubai, I kind of lose weight. It's very easy to eat healthy out there, and the negative is it's expensive to do that, but it's very easy to do so. There's so many healthy restaurants. You can order takeaway of like all your calories and macros calculated. Um, Walking on the beach, like I absolutely love. So Dubai, maybe this is one that most people weren't expecting, but it's actually a really good location for me in terms of losing weight and being more healthy. Whereas if I'm in Georgia, for example, when I first arrived in Georgia, I was actually in pretty good shape. And by the time I left, I was about two stone heavier, which is about 20 kilograms heavier. Um, anyway, don't get stuck in a fixed mindset. This is one thing that I'll tell all of you. Don't get stuck in a fixed mindset of only living in one location all of your life. And I think that is a fantastic piece of advice. I can't understand, it just doesn't make sense to me, these people. Some people have never even left their like little village or town that they grew up in. I mean, I was quite lucky in that aspect that like my parents did travel, and so it was kind of like normal to us, which definitely does come down to like a privileged background. Like I had a very normal upbringing, but we definitely went on probably like one family holiday a year, whatever, to Egypt or like to Spain or whatever. So I did grow up going and experiencing different countries. But don't be one of these people who like for example in the US it's something crazy like 50 or 60% of people haven't even got a passport. The US is great and it's very varied because of all the different states. I completely get that, but there's a whole world out there, and depending on what your goals are, there's much better places than being in the US, particularly from like a tax point of view. And that's the other thing to mention. A lot of people will think about, oh, from a tax point of view, I should open in this country because I get these benefits and it has these negatives. I get these tax benefits, it's got this bank, it's got these payment processes, whatever. But people don't think about that from their personal life, which does seem quite funny to me. People will go through a whole amount of effort to optimize where their business is located without ever thinking about optimizing where they're located. So yeah, anyway. Just don't get stuck on a fixed mindset of being in one location. Just go and travel. Like the other thing about travel is the worst case scenario, you don't like it and you buy yourself a $500 plane ticket back home, and you're literally back where you started. So there's not. It's often how I try to think about my decisions is what is the worst outcome and how easy is it for me to reverse from this decision. If I find out this isn't just to travel, this applies to every area of my life. If I make this decision, how easy is it for me to change my mind? What would I lose, and what position would I be back in? And like with travel, there's really quite limited downside. Like unless you're picking extremely dangerous countries, where of course there's possibility of kidnap if you're going out to these very dangerous places. So of course be sensible. But in 99% of cases, the downside is you got a flight over there, you realize you didn't like it, and you get a $500 flight back home, and you wasted like a couple of days. But at least you had the experience. So yeah, there's kind of limited downside to what can really go wrong if you go to a country and you don't like it. Move locations based on your current goals. For example, if your goal is to become, this is a silly example, but if your goal is to become a mountain climber, it makes sense to be in a location where there's a lot of mountains, where there's the ability for you to rent equipment to be a mountain climber, where there's other people who are mountain climbers that you can learn from and so on. So that's a very, very basic example, but it literally applies to anything else. Like if you're trying to build a particular business, it makes sense to go to a certain place to be around to have access to the right type of equipment and so on. Like even now when I'm doing like the OnlyFans business, there are requirements that I have before going to a particular country, such as we need very good and very stable Wi-Fi. We need access to good infrastructure in terms of shopping, if we need to buy a new phone, if we need a new cable for something, if we need like 4G routers or whatever it is. Like we want a good access to shops or postal delivery systems so we can order from Amazon and it arrives very quickly. So they're kind of like the things to consider. But like you can add a huge amount of friction between you and your goals by being in a location that doesn't complement what your goals are. Like this applies to applies to women. Colombia is like a perfect example of that. Taxes, business, happiness, spirituality, and literally everything else. Like for example, spirituality, I would look at if I felt I really needed to like relax and de-stress, I would be looking at somewhere like Bali. Um, in terms of happiness, you can look up like what is the happiest country in the world. I believe it's Denmark, and so you could just choose that if you want to be more happy, go and spend some time around some happy people. Um, and then the other key benefit of changing locations, which I think most people really, really overlook, is it's a chance to reset your habits. Most of your habits, like you'll notice, since I've now been out in Ibiza, I've been publishing content very, very frequently. And that's simply because I now have the habit, because I've reset myself, whereas in Colombia I didn't really have the habit. I've now reset myself and I told myself I need to record more content now that I'm out here. And so now I have the habit of to come out here, sit down the end of the garden and talk to you guys. And I know how much you will appreciate that. But in all seriousness, by moving locations, it's really a chance to reset your habits. Most of your habits are based off of cues, and cues are generally tied into your environment. So it can be cues in your apartment that trigger you to perform a certain habit. It can be the location that you're in. When you walk past a particular coffee shop, you have a habit to go in there. Whatever it is, most habits are based off of your location. So by moving locations frequently, it gives you a chance to completely reset all of the habits that you have tied to that particular location. So be aware of any like positive habits that you want to make sure that you continue to bring through with you. Though another perfect example is in Colombia. I was staying in a place that had like a fantastic gym. Like I put a few videos on my story, and so I use the gym not quite every day, but quite frequently. And one issue of being out here is we've got a little gym over there, but it's nothing to write home about. And so I found that I've been working out much less. So again, I'm not saying that I've got this whole thing perfected, but I'm just very, very much aware of it, and I suggest you to be too. Um, so yeah, it's just by changing location, it gives you a fantastic opportunity to kill any bad habits and routines you've got yourself into. And like the final point, I have mentioned this already, but you can drastically reduce your expenses by moving locations. There are some incredibly cheap countries out there where you can maintain a really, really good quality of life. For example, I was about a year ago, I was in Rize, or Rize, Rize, in the north part of Turkey. I spent about a month out there, and it's not to say that there's like some insane quality of life out there. In fact, it was a very weird little place. But the food was great. It was very easy to eat healthy there. Pretty much all they served everywhere was chicken breast and salad. And so that's what we would always order. Weather was good. Like we found a nice shisha bar that we would go to every evening, and the cost of living out there is just ridiculously low. The salaries out there are about $200. People were very friendly, super nice, and yeah, it's often in like these weird little places. If you're going to the big tourist areas, of course, like it's going to be expensive. It's kind of the same everywhere, no matter where you are in the world. To achieve a high quality level of life, I've at least found that like there's not too much variation in the cost of a 5-star hotel. You can expect to be paying like 300 to up to like maybe $700 per night, and that is kind of the same whether you're in London, whether I'm in Tbilisi, or whether I'm in Turkey, Istanbul, like kind of wherever you are, Thailand, like whatever it is. It's kind of like an international level in terms of hotels, but the place where if you're really trying to cut your expenses and save money, go to some of these smaller little towns in these places. You can get your expenses not quite to zero, but pretty close. You can live for like literally a couple of $100s per month, and I don't mean living like a bad quality of life. I mean going out to restaurants, doing everything that you want. So if you haven't got a high level of income, I would strongly suggest you to do that. Or if one of your goals at the moment is saving money, you can just go to these places, and it doesn't even feel like a chore to save money. Everything is just so cheap that you kind of naturally save money just by being there. Yeah, that is my advice on locations. I do suggest to travel a lot. Like at the moment, I'm currently setting up 4 different bases around the world. So what I mean by that is acquiring 4 different properties. I have one already. I'm currently looking at getting one in London, potentially looking at Dubai as well, and also looking at Colombia. Um, and so then the other benefit of that is, number one, I would own four assets, because whenever I'm not living there, you can rent them out, which is kind of what I would plan to do. So I'm in each different location for like 3 months of the year. Um, and whilst I'm not there, I'm there renting them out. And I completely get most people aren't in a position to just buy four properties around the world. I wasn't until very recently. Um, Thank you, OnlyFans. Yeah, it's but I'm kind of like making the most of that and setting up these different locations so that it also turns into rental income for me, which will be another form of income that I can then go and add onto the list. And another thing is weather. Like, I get super affected by weather, and there are people who just spend their whole lives like for example, I'm from London. There are people who live in London and spend their whole lives complaining about the weather. If you're looking to be in a place that has good weather, you're in the wrong country, and like the country isn't going to move to you. You have to go there. You have to go to the places that kind of align with your goals. And so Portugal as well. Portugal is south of Spain. I'm also looking at acquiring property in, and that kind of goes into my family base of like my family are now getting older, my parents, and I would like to have a place in like a warmer country where maybe they can go out to for like 3 or 4 months. You know, in the summer, like they've got a place to be, like, and I can go out and spend some time with them as well. Um, yeah, that's my kind of takeaway. But also as well, I now, as much as it doesn't look like it at the moment, the sun's just gone in. I now only spend time in kind of like warm countries, which has been like it's like a really big plus in my life actually. I was just back in London for 4 days for the first time in like a few years, and it was literally the first time that I'd experienced the cold for about 18 months, which is quite a weird weird thing to say. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. I strongly encourage all of you to go and set up some bases and explore the world.